The healthiest thing we can do is just ignore this and pretend it doesn't exist. Just like we do with the squid.
Earthquake.
Yeah, truck going by.
Ignoring the giant squid does nothing to diminish the fact that there is a giant squid in the room, or the fact that it's dangerous. This week, Pastor Terry Jones burned his Koran, and there were riots in Afghanistan with at least 14 people at the UN offices being killed, lynched, 2 of them beheaded by a bloodthirsty Islamic mob. Indeed, so incensed was this crowd by religious intolerance that they burned an effigy and beat it with a cross. Do I support Jones's motives? Of course not. Do I believe that he has performed a valuable service? Definitely. He has highlighted the fact that there is a giant squid in the room, one that thinks that the rest of the world should comply with Islamic laws, such as respecting their holy book.
Around 250 Afghan students gather at Kabul University, shouting death to America and death to U.S. pastors. The students are calling for the pastors' prosecution.
We want the international community to put on trial that American pastor who has burned our holy Koran.
Well, what are your options? To ignore the giant ideology squid? Well, newsflash, ignoring an ideology that will kill a dozen or so people for a book being burned will do nothing to diminish the existence of that ideology.
In Herat, Afghanistan, enraged demonstrators chanted "Death to America" as they torched a U.S. flag.
Ignoring an ideology that will have leaders of the most populous Islamic country on the planet state that merely burning the Quran would pose a threat to world peace will do nothing, absolutely nothing, to diffuse the barely constrained, volatile, violent behavior that this Islamic leader evidently thinks the religion causes within its adherents. If your religion is a threat to world peace because someone burned a book or mistreated it,
the hearts of 2 billion Muslims are burning, this man says.
Then it's your religion that's the problem. And that's what needs to be addressed. It's not the rest of the world that must learn to comply with Islamic laws. It's Muslims who must realize that their religious laws do not apply to the free world. It's the ideology that must change such that it no longer considers that bloodthirsty lynch mobs are a way of applying by terror and intimidation Islamic laws on the rest of the world. Inaction is not an option. Inaction merely sentences us to live in this self-same unhappy status quo, and it condemns the next generation to inherit our legacy of inaction. No, this must be addressed, and for my part, I can think of no better strategy than the one we successfully used with Draw Muhammad Day. In the first instance, there were 12 or so cartoons drawn of Muhammad, and there were riots all over the place, death threats galore, embassies burnt down.
Another Middle Eastern capital, another Western embassy on fire.
These religiously inspired yahoos were seen to intimidate people out of their free speech. And then came the decentralized global backlash of Draw Muhammad Day. Over 12,000 people drew Muhammad, and what happened? The nuclear power of the Islamic nation of Pakistan threw its toys out of the pram and cut off its internet for a few days. And that's why we're doing it again this year. Never again shall a religion that can make people psychotic enough to have bloodthirsty Islamic mobs burn down embassies be seen to intimidate an enlightened people out of their free speech. Never again. I think we should do the same thing here. But wait, I hear you say, surely you're not suggesting burning books? That would be obscene. Well, historically, yes, it has been obscene. The very concept of book burning is that there was only the hard copy of the media, and by destroying it you could effectively remove those ideas from society. But that was in the days before electronic media. I mean, really, do you consider downloading and deleting a file to be obscene in the same way that you would consider book burning to be obscene? I mean, in both cases you've destroyed a copy of the media. I mean, by this rationale, your internet cache is nothing but a continually running book burning furnace. No, in the enlightened world, it's not the concept of destroying the media that's obscene. It's the concept of trying to destroy the ideas that's obscene. Creating a new copy of the media and destroying it might seem pointless, redundant even, but I'm not going to stand idly by, with a giant and psychotic squid in the room, with factions that seek to apply their Iron Age religious laws to every human alive.
We are very upset that the devil America burned the Holy Quran.
We call for punishment for those who dishonored our Holy Koran.
That's unacceptable. And yes, I am willing to protest to demonstrate the principle that I am not subject to Islamic laws. I have no more obligation to respect the Quran than I have to bow down to Mecca 5 times a day. This is a hard drive. It's an old, obsolete hard drive I was about to decommission. Look, I can load a copy of the Quran onto this and delete it. And I'm sure no one even raised an eyebrow at this willful and intentful destruction of the Quran. After all, every Muslim who reads the Quran online does this sort of thing every day. But really, how is that any different from buying a Quran and burning it? Yeah, I think we need an electronic protest for electronic age. One that will highlight the absurd nature of these foot-stamping demands from these barbaric folk, demanding that the rest of the world must comply under threat of force with their antiquated and absurd religious laws. And in the service of this goal, on Sunday the 10th of April, 2011, I'm going to download 500,000 copies of the Quran onto this hard drive, and then burn it. It will be the largest Quran burning in history. Join in. Find an old, obsolete piece of media, something that's on its way to the landfill, and load as many copies of the Quran onto it as you can. And then do with it as you see fit. And if that's too destructive for your needs, fine. Simply download a copy of the Quran and delete it, or just leave it to the mercy of your internet cache. Highlight how in the electronic age, just how obsolete, antiquated, and absurd these religious demands being made under threat of lethal force are. But what are the consequences, I hear you ask? Isn't this going to get people killed?
Now, because of his actions, the lives of our brave men and women serving overseas may be even more in jeopardy.
Well, firstly, if you're willing to surrender your freedoms simply because someone might or is likely to get killed, then you are already a conquered and enslaved people. No sane man would allow murderous threats and murderous actions of a evidently violent ideology to be used as a bargaining chip to barter an enlightened people out of its foundational principles, the very foundational principles that led it to enlightenment and civilization in the first place. If you really think minimizing the risk to those in harm's way is the name of the game, it would reduce the risk to our troops if we all converted to Islam. Look, the reason we have troops in harm's way in the first place is to defend those foundational enlightenment principles. Surrender those principles out of the fear of the cost of defending them, and you might as well not even bothered with an army in the first place, as you've already decided to surrender to the first violent ideology that comes along. Secondly, of course, that's not how it went with Draw Muhammad Day. Initially, 12 cartoons, over 100 killed in riots around the world. Draw Muhammad Day, over 12,000 cartoons. And the response? The only Islamic nuclear power in the world burying its head in the sand and cutting off its own internet. No, I think decentralized mass action is the best choice here for ensuring that the giant squid knows that threats of force will not avail it here. I mean, let's be real. What are the alternatives? The de facto observance of specific Islamic laws in every country on the planet, and all achieved through threats of violence. No, I choose not to ignore the squid. I choose to act.